Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this May 14, 2015 edition of Nightcast. If I'm a little bit shaken, just a little tonight, this is our third effort to get on the air tonight. First couple of times, the video frames just weren't up to speed. Finally, it looks like we got it. And talk about up to speed. Our opening story here on Nightcast tonight relates to that commuter train that derailed in Philadelphia, killing at least 7 people. And the speed, it was found it was traveling at twice the speed limit, say safety experts. The driver applied the emergency brakes when the train hit 106 miles per hour, as you'll see in this opening video, on a 50-mile-per-hour track, said the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. But his efforts had only brought the speed down to 102 miles per hour when the deadly crash happened. The speed was recorded in the little so-called black box recovered from the wreckage. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has the details in this opening video.
From the search for survivors to the search for answers, crash investigators combed through the debris. Authorities still don't know what caused an Amtrak train to derail in a suburb of Philadelphia, but it was said to be going twice the speed limit before the wreck.
Maximum authorized speed through this curve was 50 miles per hour. When the engineer-induced brake application was applied, the train was traveling at approximately 106 miles per hour.
7 people were killed and more than 200 injured, some critically. At a news conference, Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter said the train's black box had been recovered.
They're in Wilmington, Delaware, being downloaded and analyzed.
Those who first got to the wreckage had to work under the cover of darkness. Passengers described a chaotic scene.
Basically, the train tilted over and rolled.
When I could see the blood on people's faces, they can't move.
Okay. Keep crawling, okay?
This video posted to social media showed survivors scrambling to get to safety. One of those on board was former Congressman Patrick Murphy.
There was 11 of us that stayed behind. I was trying to tend to them as best I could, putting pressure on their blood, on there where their blood was coming out so they wouldn't bleed out.
Hospital officials said many of the passengers suffered broken ribs, but it could have been a lot worse.
There's still a number of folks in the hospital that are going to stay overnight. Probably we're going to have 3 more surgeries tomorrow amongst the group that will stay, but there are some people that will get to go home tonight. Probably another half a dozen will get to go home tonight because their situation has improved. So in general, we're doing much better.
The train was travelling along one of America's busiest rail routes, the Northeast Corridor, which connects Washington, D.C. to New York City and Boston. But now the track behind me is silent. A short distance from here, the bend where the fatal crash occurred. As night falls, not everyone on board has been accounted for yet. Michelle Fleury, BBC News.
Thank you, Michelle Fleury. One of the comments made in this video report, though, said they didn't know what made the train derail after explaining that it was going more than twice the speed limit in a curve. I mean, to me, if you're over twice the speed limit allowed for a curve, that's an accident in the making right there. That's a derailment. That's why they have that 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. I mean, I'm just putting the facts they're giving to us together. Anyway, I'm surprised at some of the things people say today in some news stories. I guess some of you are too. We, especially today with all the incredible things going on around the world, the news stories are almost like, is this for real? But it is very real. And well, we'll talk more about prophecy and that in just a bit. Let's go on to the next video that we have, produced by the BBC, a very helpful little outline. And I'm sorry, I kind of got sidetracked because I got to change my bank so that our shots will work properly for when we want to go to those slides. All right, I've got it. Following, I wanted to go here while I make some changes on the screen behind me. Following the player on the screen behind me for the next story. And okay, it's going to open up in white, but we'll roll it in correctly. All right, friends, I'm running this show by myself tonight, but what we're going to have next, following the fatal crash of that Amtrak train in Philadelphia, the spotlight's on the Positive Train Control, PTC system. This system prompts automated safety triggers when a train is nearing risky areas. While parts of the U.S. railway system have PTC installed, the area where the recent accident occurred did not. In this video, and I got to take the volume out because it's got music that we don't have a license for, so I'm going to read to you any subtitles on the screen because we can't do the audio and let the music come through for our archive because of the copyright content ID thing. But this BBC report otherwise, the video part of it, explores how the PTC is designed to operate. I think you'll find this very interesting in light of this tragic accident. Let's roll into it now. How does Positive Train Control PTC work? Various systems track the locations of potential hazards. As you see here at the top, there's a track switch, there's a work zone, there's a slower speed limit area. Transponders on the tracks also relay track information and speed restrictions to the train. There's a 2 to 3 mile separation. As you see here, the PTC will tell engineers if they need to slow down. There's a certain warning distance, a certain braking distance. If they don't slow down, then the train will automatically brake or stop. Installing Positive Train Control across U.S. railways will cost an estimated $10 billion, the equivalent of 6.3 billion British pounds sterlings. And looks like that's the end of that little outline from the BBC. Very good job, BBC. I think we appreciate that. That's helpful, I believe, to our understanding on this news story. Friends, the next couple of news stories are heartbreaking in a way. Let me flip over to our chart just for a moment. Our news stories, what we try to do on this program, friends, is take the day's news stories that relate to the first 4 seals from the book of Revelation, out of 7 seals that are described there. Now, I say the first 4 seals because they are the only ones active at this moment. The 5th seal, even though there was a type that came before with a small martyrdom of God's saints and a certain resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire with the 6th head of the revived Holy Roman Empire during Mussolini's time between 1936 and 1945, something that was revealed at that time in 1936 through God's end-time apostle and servant, Herbert W. Armstrong. Many of you know him. Some of you scratching your head and say, who's that? Never heard of him before. I say that because I'm aware of some of you who said you were going to be tuning in tonight who are not familiar with our church background behind this program. But the 5th seal is the next major event to happen in prophecy. It's, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language in Matthew 24, it's what he called the Great Tribulation. And as it's called in or explained in Jeremiah, it's the time of Jacob's trouble. Jesus Christ in Matthew 24 said, it's a time of trouble so great that no time of trouble since the beginning of the world has ever been so bad as what's going to be coming in this mega trouble, in this, as Jesus Christ called it, described it, worded it, termed it, Great Tribulation. And he said it's so bad that no time before it's ever to this time has ever been so bad since the beginning of the world, and nor shall any time after this ever be as bad, thankfully. But the things that tell us it's coming are when these four seals, the activities of these four seals increase. And the time of Jacob's trouble that's described in Jeremiah in relation to the next seal, the next major event in prophecy to come and occur, the fifth seal, is called the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, you've got to understand who is modern-day Jacob. Back for just a second. And because of some of you who are new, I'm going to throw this at you kind of fast. This slide that you're seeing on your screen now is based on Genesis 49, when Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, Jacob, who was the father of 12 tribes that were later divided and called the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And the house of Israel became 10 tribes under Jeroboam, who became lost for a while. House of Judah remained in view because of their continuing to keep the Sabbath. The house of Israel, the 10 tribes, they stopped keeping. Under Jeroboam, they switched over to Baal worship and kept an eighth day, which wound eighth day being same as the first day of the week observance way back there under Jeroboam. That precedes modern day Baal worship and observance of worship day on the first day of the week. Now, I know I'm stepping on some toes with that. You say, hey, that's the day I go and worship. Well, you should look into why you're doing that and look into the Bible and see if that's sanctioned really in the Bible, or it's just something the leaders of the church you attend are thumping. But Genesis 49 was Jacob explaining to his sons, the 12 heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, where they would be in the latter days. And he did it by describing the conditions. And as you can see, if you can see this slide, actually we need to try to get this slide improved a little bit so it's more readable. But it is at least a little bit of readable. I can read it here. You can see where they are today by virtue of the description that Jacob gave to his sons. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that tonight because we got a couple of stories I really want to go into in detail. And let me switch out of that to this and come back on screen with you here. And some of you will have to, you need at least a little bit of an understanding of where the 12 tribes of Israel are today to understand this next story, which the headline on it reads like this: French-Israeli relationship hits a snag over Palestinian issue, involving the Pope's announcement that he's formulated a treaty in which the Vatican is recognizing a state of Palestine. Now, we'll get to that story after I explain what's happening with France and Israel, with Reuben and Judah. Strategic talks between Israel and France deteriorated as Israeli anger grew over planned UN resolution, a UN resolution on Palestinian statehood. Strategic talks between Israel and France turned sour last week. We had a report on that this last week, but this is from today's news report. They turned sour last week as anger mounted over France's plans to advance a United Nations Security Council resolution on Palestinian statehood. Yeah, Brother Reuben advanced that in the UN. While usually a venue for foreign ministry officials of both countries to talk security and diplomacy, the meetings deteriorated into disagreements over the Palestinian issue, revealing cracks in the Israeli-French relationship. Now, bent on resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through a mandated and deadline peace deal. Part of that sentence is missing, friends. I'm reading to you a news report from today on this. The draft would define the 1949 armistice lines as a reference point for peace talks between the Palestinian Authority and Israel, but allow room for exchanges of territory. So France wants to take Israel's borders back to the 1949 plan. It would also designate Jerusalem as the capital of both Israel and a Palestinian state and call for, quote, a fair solution for Palestine refugees with some vague references to Israel as a Jewish state. Israeli diplomats told the newspaper that the foreign ministry had received information suggesting France had already begun discussing the draft's language with the Palestinians, Arab states, and the Security Council. No such consultations, they claim, have been had with Israel, nor has Israel received an outline of the resolution's main points. Two Israeli diplomats told press in the Middle East that Foreign Minister Director General Ben Shitrit protested the unfair treatment during last week's talks with the French delegation led by Foreign Ministry Secretary General Christian Masset. You are speaking with the whole world about your initiative, just not with us, the pair quoted Shitrit as saying. You seem to have forgotten that we are also a party to this and that you ought to involve us, too. According to the diplomats, the French delegate grew defensive, denying they had shown a draft to the Palestinians. They said that things were at a preliminary stage and that when there was something drawn up, they'd show it to us, one diplomat relayed. And we're talking about an Israeli diplomat. They said the whole process in the Security Council was for our benefit and that they are trying to arrive at a formula that will be acceptable to both sides and would allow the resumption of the peace process. Israeli officials, however, were not convinced, and the meetings grew more confrontational, reflecting the quote, lack of agreement on the issue. And there's another story that's very similar on this, and let me cover this with you. Strategic consultations between Israel and France last week deteriorated into an argument over French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius' initiative, and that's his picture on the screen here, by the way. Friends, let me bring it forward. This is a photograph of the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, and it's his initiative to advance a resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian issue in the United Nations Security Council that's caused this conflict, with Israel arguing that Paris was operating behind Israel's back. Okay, now, what's happened? Now, that began last week with France initiating that in the UN last week. Now, today, or this week, what's happened out of the Vatican is this. And this really has Israel upset. All officials in Israel declared disappointment at the Vatican's official recognition of the state of Palestine yesterday, on Wednesday. The move also drew the ire of many in the diaspora Jewish community. The American Jewish Committee said it regrets the announcement of the treaty in which the Vatican refers to the state of Palestine rather than the Palestinian Liberation Organization as it had in previous documents. AJC Executive Director David Harris said the move was counterproductive to all who seek true peace between Israel and the Palestinians. He said peaceful coexistence is best served, we believe, by encouraging a resumption of Israeli-Palestinian peace talks rather than unilateral gestures outside the framework of the negotiating table. Additionally, the Anti-Defamation League expressed disappointment at the Vatican's decision to recognize a Palestinian state, calling the step premature. ADL National Director Abraham H. Foxman said the move would bolster the Palestinian strategy of seeking statehood through international forms and not through recognition, reconciliation, and negotiation with Israel. The heads of the Conference of Presidents of the major Jewish organizations, Chairman Robert G. Sugarman and Executive Director Malcolm Hohenlein, expressed regret at the recognition of a Palestinian state by the Vatican and called for direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations as the means for creating peace. The International Jewish Committee on Interreligious Consultations expressed concern at the Vatican's announcement and said it was unhelpful to the cause of a genuine and durable peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Betty Ehrenberg, chair of the JCIC, said the unilateral move is not in keeping with UN resolutions that mandate that a peace agreement be achieved by direct negotiations between the parties. The statements from the Jewish community echoed those of the Israeli Foreign Ministry in that the recognition undermines the peace process and allows Palestinians to avoid coming to bilateral agreements with Israel. What's called in the Vatican the Holy See's recognition made just a few days before Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas was scheduled to visit the Vatican follows what Sweden has done, which officially recognized the state of Palestine last October. We covered that story as it was happening last October. You can go back to our archive if you want to see the full news reports on what Sweden did in recognizing the state of Palestine at that time, last October, last year. According to the Associated Press, the Vatican has actually been referring to the state of Palestine for more than a year, including during Pope Francis' visit to the Holy Land last year, during which this picture comes from his visit to the Holy Land last year, as well as in reference to, and so they're claiming that the Associated Press is claiming that the Pope actually referred to the state of Palestine for more than a year, including this visit in which this picture was taken, as well as in reference to the Palestinian ambassador. Okay, friends, that's a very significant story. That has this current Pope functioning in a role that is very harmonious with history of a Pope who heads a Holy Roman Empire where he appoints heads of nations, as will happen in the future when the fifth seal that's pictured on this chart begins to happen, a time when, well, let's do it this way. Let me come out of that, and let's go to some of the photographs on the wall here behind me, and let's zoom in on that crown of the Holy Roman Empire, that part of this picture set. Now, I've mentioned to you several times, friends, how I have been over to Austria, to the Royal Treasury in Vienna, where this crown, you see pictured right here in the center of this slide, is on display. It's behind some heavy glass, guarded by guards 24 hours a day, but the public is allowed to come in, and now the public cannot take pictures of it themselves, only the government is allowed to take pictures. Now, I didn't realize that their sign that said you can't use flash in the room, I didn't realize that sign was just for things in the room, that nothing behind that glass cage could be photographed at all. So I took pictures of it without flash and then complained to a guard about that sign saying, hey, you can't, I said, you can't get a good picture of that crown without flash. And he said, well, you can't take a picture of that crown at all, period. We'll confiscate your camera. So I zipped shut my mouth and didn't tell him. Not then. Now we're talking 20, 30 years ago. When did I go to do that? Sometime in either in the early part of 1980 or late part of 1970s, when I went there after our church newspaper called the Worldwide News had an article in it that said the crown of the Holy Roman Empire would be on display in the Royal Treasury in Vienna. I was in Israel at the time I read that. My good friend Aaron Dean handed me an advance copy of the Worldwide News that had just been faxed to Mr. Armstrong, who was over there initially in the room right next to me in the Jerusalem Hilton Hotel. And Aaron brought me an advance copy then, said, hey, you might like to read this, take a look at this. We just got it faxed over from Pasadena. I said, yeah, you bet, I sure would. And when I saw that the article mentioned, I think Gene Hochberg may have had that in his weekly article in the Worldwide News, weekly, monthly, whenever we were publishing that then. And after I saw that, I said, Aaron, I'll see you, my good friend. I'm checking out of the hotel, and I've got a flight booked to Paris. And from Paris, I've got a train reserved that'll go through Germany, take me into Austria, into Vienna. And I've got a room booked there where I'll stay for a few nights, and I'm going to go over to that Royal Treasury and take a look at, see this crown of the Holy Roman Empire with my own eyeballs. I mean, to me, with this going to represent the most significant thing in world history, or at least a major, extremely major, significant event in world history, and soon now. We didn't realize Christ was going to do a big delay. I even thought it would be soon back then. But now we see the delay is coming to an end with those seals, these 4 seals from Revelation. Well, let me go ahead and put that back on the screen for a moment. These 4 seals, the first 4 seals, becoming extremely, very, very active. And as I mentioned, the next major seal is the 5th one, the last one on the far right column you see here, the Great Tribulation, a time you can escape. And you should want to escape, because now let's go around for a moment. Around the crown, we have listed here the text of what's going to be happening during this time of Great Tribulation. One of the most significant things about it, well, 2 things that are top-notch on this. It'll be the time of World War III, or round 3 of World War. That'll kick off with the Great Tribulation. it'll be a time of the greatest martyrdom of God's saints that has ever occurred. It occurred. It'll make anything that's happened before that you read about in Fox's Book of Martyrs just pale into insignificance by contrast and comparison to what's going to be happening to God's saints, those who keep the Sabbath. But that only happens to those that are left behind, that are not accounted worthy to escape this great tribulation, which at this moment, friends, you have an opportunity before you to escape it. If you want to know how, it's in one verse. Well, it's other places too, but there's one verse that really summarizes it. You may want to grab a pen real quick and write this down. If you will look in Luke 21, chapter 21 of the book of Luke, one of the four Gospels, Luke 21 and verse 36. Christ says there, if you'll do what we try to help you do in this program, watch events of the day related to the first four seals. He explains elsewhere, when you see those things become very, very increased, then know the kingdom of God is nigh, which kingdom of God cannot come until that fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, runs its course of 2.5 years. And then following that, there's another 1 year period of the day of the Lord. So there's your full 3.5 years that begin with the beginning of the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation. And some of the other events, key events, go back to that crown, some of the other key events during the Great Tribulation will be, as I mentioned, World War III commencing, a great, great, great martyrdom of God's saints. The Philadelphia era will be taken to a place of protection, a place that's described by God that's the only place in the whole world that escapes the power of what the Bible calls the beast, the dictator, the emperor, who wears this crown you see in the middle of this slide as the seventh head of the revived Holy Roman Empire. Now, you can escape and be taken to that place that's described in Daniel 11, verses 40, 41, 42. It's a triangulation of the land of the children of Ammon, Moab, and Edom. You got to look at the old Bible maps to see where that is, but all of that is just east of the waterway that runs from Lake Tiberias in Israel to the Dead Sea. There's a waterway there. Just east of that is that triangulation area, part of Jordan, that will escape the reach of the beast, of the dictator, the emperor, the seventh head of the Holy Roman Empire. And he'll be doing a great martyrdom, but not to those people God accounts worthy to escape that. That's described, that those people described in Luke 21, verse 36, who watch and pray, who watch these four seals and pray about them. Always, pray always, being concerned from the bottom of your heart, which you can really only do with God's Spirit, and you only get God's Spirit by, as Acts 5:32 tells us, if you obey God. Now, all right, I'm getting really preachy, and I got one more story to go here tonight, but there's more. You can see there's a couple more things happen during the Great Tribulation. It says Philadelphia, I've been mentioning, is the Philadelphia era of God's church is taken to the wilderness for protection and nourishment, and the two witnesses will be testifying to the world at that time. Who are they? We don't know yet. God has not announced that yet, even though some have claimed they've been it. But the tribulation has not started, and the two witnesses' work has not started, and God will reveal that when both the time is right and He's ready. And the time will be right when He's right, when He says it's right, and when He's ready for it. And none of us know exactly when that is yet, but we do know these things are the key. Christ said, when you see the branches of a fig tree, and then other places He said, the branches of any tree become tender and the little buds on it start to spring forth, you know that summer is nigh. And He contrasted that with the saying that, the parable saying that likewise, when you see these first four seals become extremely active, know that the kingdom of God is near. And as I mentioned to you before, the kingdom of God cannot come until the Great Tribulation runs its 2.5 years, and the day of the Lord runs its 1 year, for a total of 3.5 years. In between that and the sixth seal, there's some heavenly signs. I covered that a little bit last night. Sealing of 144,000. Silence in the heavens for a half hour. Should I repeat that old joke? That proves there's no women in heaven. We're going to have silence in the heavens for a half hour before God allows the first 4 angels who control the 4 winds, the first 4 trumpets of the 7 trumpets. The 7th seal is comprised of 7 trumpets. That's what the 7th seal is. It's 7 trumpets. And then the 7th trumpet itself is the 3rd woe, the 7 last plagues. The last 3 trumpets, the 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpet, are the 3 woes, the 5th one being the 1st, 6th being the 2nd, and then the 7th trumpet, the last trump, being the 3rd woe, when Christ returns and pours out the 7 last plagues. So there's your 7, 7, 7. 7 seals. The 7th seal is 7 trumpets. The 7th trumpet is the 3rd woe, the 7 last plagues. Again, that's your 7, 7, 7. Okay, all right, I went into more detail with that than I had planned, but I only have one more story. So we'll close up after this. European officials linked arms. Oh, this was almost going to make you laugh in a way. And yet it also has a very serious note to it, friends. And I'm going to ask you a question at the end of this story. It should either make you go to bed and sleep, hey, confident, we've got a NATO behind us that, look at these guys, rah, rah. Or perhaps, on the other hand, it's going to make you pray with much more fervor, oh God, thy kingdom come. Let me give you the story behind this. And there is a little video. I'm going to let you hear them to their singing. European officials linked arms and ended a NATO meeting in Turkey with a rousing chorus of the 1980s charity anthem, We Are the World. They responded to an invitation by a Turkish band to sing a last song for peace at the dinner in the city of the Antalya. Those joining in the singing included Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Koutsias, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, and UN Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini. I don't know whether to respond thank you back or not. Friends, like I asked you a moment ago, what does that do for you? Does that give you a lot of confidence in NATO, or will it make you want to pray with much greater fervency, oh God, thy kingdom come? Friends, that's it for this Thursday night report on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back Sunday night. You know, we're off on Friday and Saturday night. We'll be back Sunday night with the world, with the news between tonight and Sunday related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying thanks for joining me tonight, friends. So long, and we'll see you Sunday night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.